Alright, I am playing Baldur's Gate 3 and it is fantastic. It is like someone took a fever dream vision and turned it into a game. And I feel that is the opposite of Diablo 4. Diablo 4's biggest problem is it feels like there's no vision. There's nobody at the helm, there's no leader who's in control of where the game goes in the future. So for this game, Baldur's Gate 3, it feels like the vision of Baldur's Gate 3 is allow people to just do whatever the hell they want. And in this game, there's a god, and I'm kind of talking trash to the god. I'm like, are you a real god? I don't think you're a real god. I think you're useless. If you're a real god, why don't you do it yourself? And then the god just kills me, and I'm not expecting there to be an actual god in the game. And there is. There's multiple gods in this game, and the god just kills you, and it says game over. That's fantastic. So far, I've loved everything about Baldur's Gate 3. But I want to talk about Diablo 4. And the fact that Diablo 4 is just missing its soul. It doesn't have a soul. So when you're playing Diablo 4 and you're done with Diablo 4, you think to yourself, what was the overall objective of Diablo 4? What is the soul? What is the purpose? What is their gaming mission statement? For a lot of games, there's a lot of mission statements. So let's just think about, I don't know, Dark Souls. Like the vision for Dark Souls, like a tough but fair, very deliberate combat system. You can't button mash in Dark Souls. Dark Souls does not want you to button mash. It doesn't want you to push buttons blindly. It wants you to time your attacks and swing. It's almost like a Dance Revolution type combat game. And it puts its combat right on the surface. That's all that's important. It doesn't give you any story beats. All the story beats of Dark Souls are pretty much hidden because the vision of the game is an action role-playing combat game that focuses primarily on combat and then secondarily on story. And they do that through the vision of the game. And that was all done through Miyazaki. I don't know his name. Miyazaki. If you're named Miyazaki in Japan, apparently you're just a badass. That's just the way it goes. Then you have Nier Automata. Vision for Nier Automata, aside from, 2B's booty, is that it's kind of the exploration of the human experience. Almost like ethics and philosophy and morality all tied up into one game. And when you're done with that game, the delivery of that vision is absolutely perfect. And a game like Left 4 Dead is zombie shenanigans with friends, and they execute and deliver on that vision perfectly. So what is the vision for Diablo 4? I can't think of a vision. So it's a looter, but the loot sucks ass. So let me get a video here. I found me a little video of Path of Exile's loot. Let's pop this in here. Little video of Path of Exile's loot. Here's a bunch of people getting mirrors of Calandra. They're all excited. They're all hyped. Watch this guy. He's just playing the game.
That was, guys. Holy!
And he blows his mind getting a mirror of Calandra. And there's all kinds of loot in Path of Exile. The loot in Diablo 4, you're not going to get that experience from Diablo 4. No matter what loot drops, you're not going to be that excited about it like you can be with Path of Exile. So the identity of Diablo 4, the soul of Diablo 4, is not loot. When you're done with the game, you didn't feel like the purpose of that game was loot. Now, Path of Exile, currency and loot is a big part of the purpose. Also build creation and, clever mechanics. But Diablo 4 doesn't have that. Okay, if it's not loot, then it might be like the multiplayer events. But the multiplayer events are kind of lame. They don't have any detail to them. The coolest multiplayer event is somewhere between either a Helltide and a world boss, but none of those feel like a multiplayer experience because it's not connected to the community. Let's use Left 4 Dead for example. Let's throw up a Left 4 Dead video. I can't put it in the search. Let's put up this guy's Left 4 Dead. Yeah. When you complete Left 4 Dead, it goes through a list of statistics for you and your whole party. Number of times incapacitated. I took a 480 video. I just grabbed the first one. Melee kills, bile jars used, hunters killed, boomers killed. A bunch of stats that kind of help you synergize the multiplayer experience. So for Left 4 Dead, You're cooperatively, but also competitively playing with a group of friends. And at the end of the match, you get to see how well you did in comparison to your friends. But with Diablo 4, you fight a world boss. You have no clue who's doing what damage. You have no clue your performance. There's no stats. There's no leaderboard. There's no online play mechanics. So the identity of Diablo 4 as some kind of MMO or multiplayer ARPG, that's dead as well, because there's no soul there. There's no identity of a multiplayer game like that. Okay, well, maybe it's a PvP game. Nope. It's not a PvP game. PvP in that game is trash. Helltides are kind of fun, but there's nothing really tying it in. So let's go back and let's take a look at Diablo 3. What was Diablo 3's identity? Well, Diablo 3 had a very clear leaderboard pushing Greater Rift identity, while Diablo 3 was cooking through Reaper of Souls. Every season, I'd probably only play for the first weekend, maybe Monday and Tuesday on there, but for the first few days, I would be in the top 5 of the leaderboards almost every time for Greater Rifting. I'd run Greater Rifts. It was extremely fun, and I would try to push those leaderboards, and it would give me a reason to play and compete with other people. Diablo 4 has none of that. It feels like there's no soul behind Diablo 4. And a lot of people might say, well, the purpose of Diablo 4 is to sell microtransactions to its customers. But is it? Does Diablo 4 really have good microtransactions? Is the gear that you can buy in Diablo 4 good? Are the horse mounts good? Not really. None of that stuff is very good. None of it is appealing. None of it is artistic. None of it is anything. And even a game like Bomberman has better social aspects than Left 4 Dead. In Bomberman, Saturn Bomberman, one of the best multiplayer couch co-op games ever created, when you're done, it'll give you this little victory ceremony, and it'll do stats. It gives you the winner, gives you second place. Makes me want to play some Bomberman. Second place. It gives you B Point King, and if there's a Mad Bomber, well, they didn't have Mad Bomber, but they give you Mad Bomber, you get awards. So if Diablo 4 wants to have some type of identity or soul, they're going to have something in it that is unique, something in it that stands out, something that says, this is the vision for Diablo 4. And they don't have that. I don't know if they ever will have that, but some free advice for the developers of Diablo 4: hire someone to lead the team. It doesn't matter if they lead the team in a bad direction. At least there's someone leading the team. Almost every good game, you can feel someone's identity in that game. You can feel that there was a person in the game that was like, I want this game to do X, Y, Z. Even a simple game like Vampire Survivor. He wanted the game to be a game where you level up, you get loot, and you kill things. And that's all you do, and that's the identity of the game. Diablo 4 just feels so soulless. And I'm not being negative on Diablo 4 just to be negative. I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3, and it's just such a stark difference between what you get with Diablo 4 and what you get with Baldur's Gate 3. Now, if they want to prove Diablo 4, the first thing they need to do is they need to add in the social elements. Even Diablo 3 had a leaders board. You can go online. I think you can even go to the leaderboards from the front end engine. You can go check out the leaderboards and see who's pushing Greater Rifts. You can go look at their gear and say, this is who's pushing the Greater Rifts. There's nothing to push in Diablo 4. There's nothing to compete. There's no reason to play the game in terms of like growth. The only reason you'd want to play Diablo 4 beyond a few days is to try out new builds, but their build specs are lame. To get loot, but finding loot is lame. You find a piece of loot, there's a couple that are build-defining pieces of loot, but you find a new ring upgrade, you're not going to feel it. Hell, you take off a ring, as long as it doesn't have a unique mod that you need, you won't even notice. Take off a ring, you won't even notice. You just play the game just fine, just like normal. So Diablo 4 is lacking a soul, it's lacking identity, it's lacking leadership, and before it can get good, because I have full faith, I don't have full faith. I have 90% faith that in a year, maybe 2 years, Diablo 4 is going to be in a completely different state. It's probably going to be a good game. But it will only be a good game if someone takes the lead and builds the game to a vision, to something that they want to accomplish with the game. And I think that the multiplayer aspect would be a pretty good vision, because that's one of the weaker elements of Path of Exile, is the multiplayer aspect. And if they focus on that multiplayer aspect, they can do a lot of different things. Say you go to a raid boss, right? And it can do like a little ranking on the side that has a little bar that says how much damage each person's doing. Or even at the end of the world boss, it'll show up a little splash screen, and it says everybody who damaged the world boss and how much damage they did, how much they contributed. And they can throw a bunch of different stats at the end of the world boss that's going to incentivize people to do the world boss. Another great idea that they can do for Diablo 4 is, while the world boss triggers, you have like an hour. So for that hour, while you're waiting for the world boss, it could turn the entire world into a forced PvP zone. So it forces people into PvP for an hour just before the world boss. So that way they cancel out all their events. They're forced to do PvP or take a break. Maybe open up one area and do like a Hell Tide. There's one Hell Tide zone, and then everywhere else is PvP. And what that's going to do is that's going to force everyone into the same zones, same community before the world boss. So everyone's going to go do PvP, and you get a bunch of really good PvP stats. Or even better, there's a world boss zone, and when you go into that world boss zone, when it starts the world boss, first there's 20 minutes of PvP. You got this tight little zone, 20 minutes of PvP. You don't lose equipment gear, you die, and then you get like a 20-second respawn timer, and then you get to go back in. And the whole time it's doing all kinds of statistics. Who is getting the most kills? Who is doing the most damage? Who has the least amount of deaths? Who has the most amount of deaths? And it's racking up all these stats, and then it's going to drop rewards directly to the players that have done the best. So let's say we get a guy, top DPS. He did the most amount of damage in the PvP zone, and it splashes up the gear, the loot that he finds for everybody to see. It splashes it up on everyone's screen. It'll say the consumer did the most amount of damage. His loot reward is this legendary item. And then you'll have another one, most kills. His reward is this legendary item. So that way everyone who participated in that PvP event, when the PvP event is over, just before the world boss triggers, you're waiting for the results of that PvP event to see if you're a winner. And if you win, then you get a piece of loot. That would be freaking incredible. But it doesn't feel like there's anyone at Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, that has any kind of passion or originality or uniqueness for the game. And I think that might be a byproduct of the corporate structure within Activision, within all gaming. The people that made Baldur's Gate, I don't know the name of the company, but they obviously don't have a very rigid corporate structure. If one person wanted to add something into the game, it is possible for that one person to add something in the game. But for Diablo 4, it feels like one person is never going to be able to leave their fingerprint on the game. And that's a huge problem, because when you look at some of the best games, you can feel the characteristics of the game designer all through it. You have the Miyazaki from Dark Souls. You have Yoko Taro from Nier Automata. You have the guy who does all of those Metal Gear Solid games, which I've never played any of. Bunch of other, like Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games, right? He obviously has a vision for where he wants Path of Exile 2 to go. That vision is going to be a more slow, deliberate combat vision. And obviously it's Ruthless inspired. He likes Ruthless. That's his vision. Whether that's good or bad for the game doesn't matter. It's original, it's unique, and it's someone's vision. Someone's dreams are going down in these games. And Diablo 4 is lacking all of that. The corporate structure could very well be it, because it's managers and non-gamers that are trying to do a checklist of things that the game needs versus a soul. So instead of having a soul, a spirit, an identity, a vision for the game, it's just a well-made game that feels empty when you play it. I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. It does not feel empty. It feels like humans are proud of what they've created in Baldur's Gate 3 from a passion standpoint. But from Diablo 4, the only real pride you can get from Diablo 4 is the actual game engine that looks nice and that plays nice, and some of the artwork. But the actual development mechanics in Diablo 4 are all just subpar and bland and soulless and lifeless, that it's mind-boggling to this extent that I don't even understand it. I can't even understand how Diablo 4 released in this state. Now, I'm not too much of a hater I do think Diablo 4 is going to be great, but it will never be great if they can't get a person with vision or drive or just a boss, like one head figure for Diablo. I am the guy in charge of everything. Everything goes through me. This is the vision for Diablo 4. That's what Diablo 4 needs. That's what it's lacking. And I hope they get this shit together. I hope at some point Diablo 4 is an absolutely fantastic game that works in conjunction with Path of Exile 2. And in 2 years from now, I'll be able to launch a Diablo 4 season, spend 2 weeks there, and then a Path of Exile 2 season, spend 3 to 4 weeks there, and stagger between the two. It'll be great. Now, Diablo 3 was always a very different game than Path of Exile, and I like that. Diablo 3 is like an extension of the Gauntlet Legends series. It's more action-oriented. It's not as loot-focused. It's not as skill tree-focused. But when you were doing those greater rifts, it was intense. Like, I remember the first time I cleared a greater rift 90, it was super intense. And that boss battle was crazy. It was nuts. And I liked it a lot. But it wasn't the same thing as Path of Exile. It was different. It had its own vision. And Path of Diablo 4 right now, it just doesn't have a vision. It doesn't have proper leadership, or, creative leadership, I should say. That's it. I was just playing Baldur's Gate 3. Wanted to rant a little bit about Diablo 4 and all the problems with Diablo 4, so I figured I'd do that. That is all.